Today on the podcast, Angelo Calfo joins me all the way from the States, a very interesting career with an even better person. Angelo, welcome to the podcast.
Jamie, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
No worries, absolute pleasure. So do you want to start us off then with where I usually go with these footballers like yourself, is who actually got you into the game?
It's a great question. I think soccer or football in the younger ages in these states is very, very prevalent. So I started playing at a really young age, probably around like 3 or 4, just in like a local community type of league. But I didn't really start taking football seriously until I started working with a couple coaches that actually had come over from the UK. So Stuart Thornton is from London, from Essex, and he is still working in Seattle to this day. He runs his own private training and street football company. And Kevin Walsh, who now owns a club called Seattle Celtic, which is one of the biggest clubs now in the Pacific Northwest. But when they first came over, they had just come over on I don't know if it was like on a work visa to be coaches or student visas or how they had initially had come in. But they were working with a company called International Soccer Schools. And once I started working with Kevin and Stu and just like and Donnie as well was another, a Welshman that came over who's still living in Washington. And kind of the three of them, it just really inspired me so much, just seeing the love of the game, the passion of the game that they have, having people that were coming from a footballing culture that obviously the States isn't. And they really, all three of them kind of took me under their wing. And, ever since then, I was completely, football crazy. So I would really contribute a lot of it to those three. Stu is the one who I, continue to go back and see every time I'm in Seattle, continue training with him. And has been my mentor really since I met him when I was like 10. So, yeah, I'd say that those three are the biggest influences I've had.
I speak to quite a few Americans or people who live over in the States, and they all give me quite differing opinions on whether soccer out there is actually as big as what some people might make out. So for you, I suppose it probably varies state by state, but for you, when you were growing up, was soccer a big thing around?
Soccer growing up was nowhere near the level of attention that the NFL or the NBA or, even, in a lot of states hockey. But in Seattle where I grew up, the Sounders are a big team and have one of the biggest fan atmospheres in the MLS. And so, when I was in middle school, so probably the ages of like 9 or 10, they went into that MLS, made the jump from the USL. And, when that happened, you could tell that there was definitely a shift, that a lot more people in the Seattle area we're starting to get a lot more into soccer, football, and I think that having experienced the two cultures, though there's not as much of an intensity. I think people love the Sounders and they're enjoyable to go to the games, but you don't feel it in the city when the Sounders lose. You don't see people talking about it in coffee shops or in restaurants. So it's just a much different feeling and emotion behind the culture with the game.
I think Seattle Sounders is a really cool football club. I don't know why. Maybe the green just gets me all the time. I don't know. But when you grew up, did you support a team?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to Kevin Walsh, who I mentioned earlier. Kevin's from Ireland, but he supports Everton, and so he actually lived in the basement of one of my closest friends. So when I was younger, I'd always go over to his house, go down to the basement, and Kevin would have Everton posters up on the wall. Same with Donnie as well. The two of them both supported Everton. And then from then on, I was an Everton fan. And those two are the reason why. So, I supported Everton all the way through. To be honest, I've dropped off a bit in how much football I watch in the Premier League the past couple of years. But I supported Everton, fervently, leading up to that point because of them.
Well, maybe it's because Everton haven't been doing too well up until the point you probably stopped watching them, but they've actually done all right this season. I was going to ask you, because I don't know if you heard, but a notification came through. Liverpool have just announced Andrea Iraola, the former Bournemouth manager, as Liverpool's new head coach. What do you make of such a tactician like him?
No, I think it's amazing. I think obviously with the season that Slot had, it's no surprise that they've looked to change direction. I think obviously managing at Bournemouth and managing at Liverpool are two completely different jobs and two completely different tasks. And I think football is a lot more than tactics. So hopefully Iraola is able to step into that big stage and hopefully perform. I mean, for Everton's sake, I hope they lose every game and he gets sacked. But Yeah, he's an interesting manager with interesting ideas.
For sure. I want to know then about your career. So I want to speak to you firstly about university football. I know that that's something very big in America, and I don't think we quite have it as much here in the UK. So for an American and an American university in the States, what was that like for you to play soccer whilst also learning as well? And what did you study on the side?
Yeah, it's one of the few countries in the world that combines soccer and academics, or football and academics. I think in Scandinavia, there's a couple countries that have toyed with it or have some decent level of it. Ireland, obviously, there's a couple teams that are in the League of Ireland that have a attachment to a university. And then England, there's the Bucks League, and I had a little bit of an experience with that in Leeds before I came back home. But it's completely different. I think that football, baseball, basketball have created these, mega billion-dollar industries, and NCAA soccer is kind of riding on the coattails of that a little bit, just from the sense of fans and people that are really connected to the team because of that sport. But being able to combine both was amazing. I studied sports management, and then in my last year I was getting a master's in philosophy. So it was an amazing way to be able to combine those two two things that I really wanted to continue my footballing career, and then also to be able to get a degree that my family really wanted me to get. The level was, really interesting. There's some extremely high-level players that are in college soccer, and you see it now with all sorts of different, players that are playing all over the world and in some of the top clubs in the world. I think in a lot of ways there are a lot of disadvantages to playing college soccer, especially because of the 3-month season, which is actually set to change this coming season, which will be really cool to see how that impacts the development. But I think for when I was going through the 3-month season with the spring season, that wasn't really fully competitive. It was kind of more of like a, kind of more of a development phase, I guess you could call it. But that's not really cohesive for the way professional football works. So, but no, I mean, Gonzaga University was an incredible experience for me. The 3 years I spent there were amazing. I had amazing coaches, incredible teammates that I still talk to this day. I spoke to one of them on the phone, 30 minutes ago. So it was an amazing step for me in my career, and a great place to, be able to combine both of those things I was passionate about.
We'll speak about the World Cup later on, but American football, well, not American football, football in America is changing all the time, because I know that they're now changing the way that they play their game on and off the pitch. I believe now you're transitioning to a more European style season. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is going to be in effect for next season for college soccer.
And you'd also hope, for your sake and everyone else's sake, that there'll be promotions and relegations happening soon, and who knows what can happen. Look, what I'm trying to get at is football in America is always changing, and it's always adapting. I spoke to someone who played in the MLS Next Pro. What was that level? Is that level comparable to your university level?
Yeah, so MLS Next Pro is the second team of these MLS teams. And so the MLS Next Pro in the American soccer football pyramid is technically considered third, next to USL 1 and what was NISA, which is not really a league anymore. But MLS Next Pro is a really interesting environment because you're training every day with in the same facility as an MLS first team. You're playing under the name of a MLS first team, but you have a big range of players that are either coming up through the academy, or a lot of these players got drafted from college and are kind of in that middle ground between being in with the first team and maybe they're training with them multiple times a week but not every day, and then they come back down and play games with MLS Next Pro. So it can be a great environment for younger players, to get that experience of playing at such a high level and mixing in with these guys that have already experienced college soccer, or maybe even the USL, or maybe playing overseas. But I think typically for players that around my age, or probably over the age of 23, 24, they normally tend to try to get into the USL at that point, because the chances of getting into the MLS first team at that age are a little bit different than when you're younger. But it's a very competitive league, and there's a lot of good football and a lot of great talents that are currently playing in it.
You made a loan spell at Portland Timbers under 23s. In England, it seems to me that there is starting to become a transition, and for example, Watford have got rid of their under 23 side because they want to just transition from under 18s to senior football. So for you to go to an under 23 side, I know you were a bit younger, what was that environment like for you? Do you think you benefited from that sort of environment?
Yeah, that was an amazing experience for me at Timbers 23s. I was coached by a guy named Matt Broadhead, who's brought together a really good group of players, a lot who went on to play in the MLS at different clubs. Nobody actually from that team stayed or played at Timbers. But it was a great group, and I got to play every game, and I was the captain of the team there. And I think I developed a lot as a player. That under 23 side is under the name of Portland Timbers, and it's associated with the Portland Timbers, but they got rid of it as well because I think they just didn't see a point of having a Portland Timbers under 23s and also an MLS Next Pro. And also they competed in the USL 2 at that time. So there were a lot of MLS clubs that were putting these under 23 teams out that would compete in USL 2, but now because of, and I'm pretty sure this is the reason, I'm assuming so, is because of that rivalry now between the MLS and the USL. You don't see as much of those, combinations where you have a USL team playing in the MLS or a USL team playing in MLS Next Pro, or a former USL team playing in MLS Next Pro.
I think the American system confuses me because I believe you've got some Canadian teams in there, you've got some Mexican teams sprinkled in there. It can get quite confusing. But for a player that's aspiring to be a professional in America, obviously you've got the West and East divide. So have you got to try and make it quite regionalised where you have to really just focus on sort of your local teams? Or in America, I know that you guys have the saying where a day's worth of travelling is, nothing to you.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think there's a lot of people I grew up with in Seattle that would drive to go to the Portland Timbers. And there's a lot of homestay programs in the United States as well with the MLS Next Academy. So, if you get seen playing at an event when you're, at the ECNL or MLS Next level, which is the two now, premier youth leagues that players are coming up in, then, if you get seen by a scout in San Jose, they'll probably put you up and give you a host family to live with, even if you're playing in Connecticut. So there are a lot of opportunities like that, but I think Americans also do see the travel differently. I don't think a lot of Americans, or at least I didn't understand how big our country was in comparison to other countries as well. So a lot of the players, are willing to go wherever it takes to get those opportunities. So while I said, there's guys that I know that have traveled to Portland for those kind of opportunities to play in that academy setup, I also know of a lot of people that have gone all the way to the other side of the country, or gone from Miami to Cincinnati or LA to wherever. So I think it really comes down to more the opportunity, and also, to be honest, the structures that are set up in professional soccer or even youth soccer in the United States don't really, or at least not yet, haven't really thought about it from that perspective of trying to set things up regionally to be more conducive to maybe lower level professional teams. Because when I was playing in NISA and the team had the tiny budget, trying to make flights over to Los Angeles were very, very difficult on the team. And the same thing for trying to get to Detroit, taking a van there the entire way, getting straight off the van, playing a game, getting straight back in the van. I think that trying to regionalize football in the United States is a really good idea, and the ECNL actually has done that, and the same with MLS Next, but it hasn't always been the case like that, especially for pros.
You spent quite a few years in the USL League 2. I know that you spent time in England, so perhaps you've watched some English games, maybe with Everton. But how can that level compare? What is the USL League 2 like on an English scale?
It's always a great question to try to think about comparing the levels. I had a coach at Texoma this past season, Adrian Forbes, who was at Luton, and he would kind of give his analysis on that to us a lot, because it was the first time him seeing the American system. USL 2 is a really interesting league because I played at Ballard and Portland Timbers under 23s, and both of those teams had a lot of guys that went on to play in the MLS and USL at a variety of different levels. So those teams are really interesting because you'll see these players that are still in their collegiate careers that still have a chance of getting drafted and making it to the MLS, but they're taking this like loan spell, I guess you could call it, away to go train and play with this club and get this new opportunity. So I don't think it's as incremental to say like the USL 2 is going to always be beaten by a USL 1, or even the same for a USL 1 by USL Championship. It really just depends on the team and the investment. But I think USL 2 could probably be looked at in a similar way to maybe like a Premier League under 23 teams from the development standpoint. But in terms of the level, I'd probably say it's a lot closer to like a National League North or I'd probably say like a National League North. It's a completely different game though. It's a lot of like up and coming type of players versus National League North, I think of players that are extremely experienced, have been in the game, been at a lot of different levels in the football pyramid. So I think it's really hard to make a comparison, to be honest.
What's the support like down there? Because you mentioned National League North. There's some sides there that get unbelievable attendances for that level of football, but for you guys, you might be used to quite a different attendance.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the fans in England are incredible. We were just watching the Rochdale versus York City highlights, and to think that's the National League is amazing. But Ballard FC had incredible fans. I think we were the first team that went in with Ballard. It was in their inaugural season, and we walked out. We had no idea what we were going to go into, and there was 1,500 people there, and they were very, very involved and just super welcoming in the community. So it can range for USL 2. There's clubs. I believe it's Lionsbridge was the name of the USL 2 team that would average around like 6,000 or 7,000 fans per game. But then at Portland Timbers, when I played there, I think we'd probably have about 20 people there on a good day. So it really depends on the city or the history of the team as well. And it's the same for the USL as well. You see teams like Portland Heart of Pines and USL 1 that are consistently getting 7,000 or 8,000 fans a game, and there's other teams in the USL that really struggle to get anybody in the stadium.
Forgive me for not knowing the ins and outs of the American footballing pyramid, but when you were at Flower City Union, you played in the US Open Cup. That to me is associated with golf. So I want to know, is this like the FA Cup of America?
Yes. So the US Open Cup is the same as the FA Cup. It doesn't have quite the same reach, I guess, that the FA Cup does in England because everything is unified in one pyramid. But because of the way American soccer is, and everybody has their different leagues, and it's not all connected, and there's a lot of confusion. It doesn't really go down to the amateur like Sunday league level that it does in the UK.
Okay, so you at Flower City Union could have ended up playing LA Galaxy. Is that how it could have worked?
Yeah, and the year before, Flower City lost to DC United 1-0. So we went in, and everybody was really hoping that we could, get a MLS bid to play against an MLS team. But with Flower City, we beat Manhattan Soccer Club, which is a USL 2 team in Manhattan, New York. And then we went to Loudoun United in USL Championship and lost to them in the second round. So, yeah, it's a great competition. There is a lot of MLS teams that are declining to play in it, which is a big disappointment because, you obviously want to be able to get the opportunity to play against the best teams in the country, but there are, a lot of political aspects to soccer in America as well that I don't fully understand either. So, yeah, it's a very interesting time as well in American soccer.
What do you make? So we sort of touched upon there at the university. I know in England we have scholarships, but for example, DC had Wayne Rooney there. I know there's some managers like Mark Warburton out in the States. There's loads of people from so many different countries, but specifically England. What do you make of English managers and former English players coming over to the States? Because what can you learn from them that perhaps you couldn't learn from another coach in America?
Yeah, I think every coach that you have is going to have a different style and philosophy based on the experiences that they had. So at Miami right now, I'm working with Gaston Modoni, who's coming from Argentina. And so he has a completely different managerial style than Adrian Forbes had at Texoma. Because of my experiences playing in Leeds, when I was under Rob Jones and John Henry, and having that experience of already being coached by, English players that have become coaches, I was, very comfortable with the English style, and I really enjoy playing for English coaches. But I think the biggest thing that they bring over is just a wealth of knowledge and experience that is just different than, an American coach would have from, if an American coach played in the MLS. Just different experiences, different ways of seeing the game. And, sometimes it goes really, really well, and other times it doesn't. But I've always enjoyed playing for English coaches, and I've been really, really lucky to have some amazing coaches. Jordan Sullivan at Flower City was also from the UK, and he's someone that I really respect and loved playing for. But, I've also loved playing with Gaston Modoni this season, which is a completely different managerial style. So I think all in all, having these different opportunities to play for different coaches from different cultures has been, just an incredible learning experience for me. If I to continue to take into my career and then maybe into coaching as well.
Well, the reason why I asked that question is for two reasons. Firstly, I'm never going to make it to your level, so I would never know. And secondly, because I'm English, I'm so used to having English coaches, and at Sunday League, I don't often deal with a German manager or an Argentine. What is the English style then for an American? Because if I had to identify it, it's going to be quite slow football, knock it up top to the two attackers up front. I don't think we have much of a flair to us.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, the stereotype in America is that English coaches are extremely direct. They want the long throw-ins, hit the channels. My experiences weren't necessarily like that. Over here, Jordan at Flower City really was committed to wanting to play out of as many situations as we could. He loved to invert his center backs and was very, very adventurous in his style of play. And it worked out for us because we ended up, winning the league. And so, he had a very different than the stereotypical English style. And Adrian at Texoma was kind of the same. Adrian wasn't, was really liked to see us play out, felt like we had the players to do that. And, didn't really bring in a squad that would match the traditional 4-4-2, hit it up top. He was also open to, trying different formations and trying to see what the strengths of the group were and then try to match our play style based on what was available to him. So that hasn't been my experience, over here so far with the coaches that I've had. And, the coaches I had in England as well weren't like that either. So I do hear the stereotype, and, you can watch some English football and you definitely see it. And I understand why they play that way. But so far I think the stereotype hasn't really been my own personal experience so far.
And I think specifically in the Premier League, because there's such an influx of so many different nationalities as players, I often think that Englishman's mentality probably won't work with a Spanish winger, for example. You went to Western Bears in Australia, and I love learning about these new teams because they've got so many fascinating names. How did you actually get the move to Australia? Was it through an agent or social media?
No, that's a great question. I loved my time at Weston. After my season ended at Flower City Union, I really wanted to try to play overseas. And, truthfully, it was also very difficult to find another team in America. I think, when you win the league in a lot of other countries, typically it'd be like, oh, I'm going to make a step up, or I think somebody's going to come in. But it really felt like my options were very limited in the United States. And also with the way the NISA League was in that season prior, I kind of knew I wanted to try to experience something different just because of how disorganized it was and just the way it was ran. So I put my video out on LinkedIn, and there was a Dutch agent who reached out to me and, said, hey, I really liked your video. And we ended up talking, and the plan initially was to try to go play in Croatia or somewhere in Europe where, Americans are able to go in without an EU passport. And then randomly he said, oh, my friend Q Hollians, who played at the World Cup with the Netherlands and spent 20 years in the Eredivisie, reached out to me and they need a center back. And I did a Zoom call with Q, and before you knew it, I think a week later I was on a flight to Australia to go play for the Bears. So that's the way it came up. It was very random. That was on LinkedIn as well, the way I got in touch with the agent from the Netherlands. So, yeah.
You've got a swag about you, the Bears. It just flows off the tongue. Maybe I should start with the swag as well. But when you go to a new side, and I want to compare it, I can only compare it to myself really, because but if I try out for a Sunday League side, I'm absolutely shitting myself. I'm like, no, I can't do this, and it's hard to back your ability. But I suppose because you're a professional footballer, your mindset is obviously going to be very different. But when you are going to the other side of the world, the players that are already at the club, the coaches are going to expect something from you. They've paid for a flight overseas. Do you get nervous when that happens and you have to go and prove yourself in the first few sessions?
Yeah, definitely. I would be surprised if anybody says that they're not nervous going in, because there's a lot of pressure too if you're going to another country. A lot of times that you're one of the few international spots that they're going to invest in, and they're expecting a lot out of you. And you're going into a new group of guys, a new culture as well. It can be difficult to try to assimilate into a culture that you're not used to. You have a different accent. So, Weston was an amazing experience. I went in, I got picked up at the airport, by the club. And then the next day I was in training with the under 14s. They invited me to come out, and everybody from the youth club to the sponsors that I would meet to the first team players were so welcoming. And so that move was really, really easy to come in and, be able to just feel like I could be myself right away and just start enjoying living in Australia. It was definitely an adjustment as well because I went from full-time in football, and, in Australia it's kind of this interesting combination of a lot of people that are coming from full-time football that are now coming from semi-pro, or they have another job as well. So that took some getting used to, but it was an amazing experience.
Really interesting, actually, because obviously they speak English in Australia, so that part isn't really so much of a problem. But it's nice to hear that when you're going to a club like that, and even the under-14s or the under-10s or whatever, they really look up to the professional team, which is really interesting. You obviously have made a return to the United States since. So when it all ended with the Bears in Australia, why did it come to an end?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a really funny story. Like, to stay in Australia to play another season, you have to go do 3 months of farm work. So basically the conversation with the Bears was like, you go to the blueberry farm and you do your time, and like you could come back and do another season. And I loved my time at the Bears, but I kind of knew that after that 1 year I was going to leave, and I wanted to try to get back into the highest level of football I can. And I always did want to come back to the States. But what actually happened was I went to Indonesia because the timing from the windows didn't really make sense at that point for me to come back to the States. And it was close to Australia. I was in Cairns, Australia at the time, like visiting. And I just decided, me and my girlfriend were like, what, let's go to Bali and hang out there for a bit until we kind of know a bit more clarity. There was the agent I was working with at the time was telling me that there was a couple moves that I was expecting to happen, and they didn't really come off. And I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to go somewhere where maybe it's a bit more economic to stay there rather than in Australia. And then I was in Indonesia for 3 months. I met an agent there my second day, and I tried to play in Indonesia. And I was actually at a club called Persela Lamongan for 2 months. And I wasn't able to sign with Persela for a variety of reasons. One of the biggest issues was that when you're coming from the NPL in Australia, you actually can't go and sign in Indonesian second division. You have to have come from a first or second division of a professional league. So there's like an amateur, or like a what do they call it? It was a board of quality control or something in Indonesia, and they said that was one of the biggest issues, is that it looked like Weston wasn't a club or a league that hit that status. So then once I got that news from Persela that it wasn't going to work out, then I flew back to the States. And, randomly I got a message from Jordan Sullivan at Flower City. He was like, hey, the coaches at Texoma are really interested in you. And I hopped on a Zoom call with Adrian Forbes and Ben Clarvis. And I signed a few days after that with Texoma FC. So it was very, very random. And they had seen me from NISA, from that year in NISA. So very, very random the way that it all happened. And I thought I was going to be spending the rest of my career in Asia, to be honest.
It's so interesting because when you're telling me this, it's almost like a story. But you were probably waiting there for days, and all of a sudden you get text messages and it all just falls into place. You mentioned your girlfriend there. So has she travelled around the world with you too? I know you haven't been to hundreds of countries, but I suppose when you do move clubs, she moves with you, right?
She does, yeah. And she's incredible, and she's so supportive. And I am very, very grateful that she's willing to do that, because it's not easy at all. But she was still in university at University of Oregon when I started my pro career, and even when I was at Gonzaga, because we met when I was playing for the Portland Timbers 23s for that summer, because she's from Portland. And so when I was at Flower City, she came for the summer for like the off time for her studies, and then she flew to Australia after she graduated, and then she came with me to Bali, and then she came with me to Texoma, and then she's here with me now in Miami. So yeah, she's an incredible, incredible person.
What was your experience actually like in Indonesia, just in terms of the fan culture? Because I've spoken to so many, whether they be Asian footballers or coaches just out in Asia, and they say the football culture over there is insane.
It was unbelievable. It was such an eye opener. Honestly, I was very naive. I really didn't understand much about the way Asian football works, or really what the fans were like. But I arrived in Bali, and I ended up getting connected with Santos, who's my agent over there, because we did like a training session together. And I really quickly realized how big of a deal it was. I was in Bali at the time, but these clubs are these fans are so passionate. So even at my time at Purcell, like there was people that would take photos outside of the training ground. When you're in there, they were sneaking pictures of me. I was getting hundreds of messages on my DMs because all of these Purcell fan channels were posting that I had signed or I was about to sign. So I was getting flooded with these welcome to Purcell messages. People outside of the training ground trying to like get pictures and trying to ask the players like what's going on, is he signing, is he not signing. So it was amazing to see that, and I got to watch a couple games in Indonesia as well. So I would love to try to go back and play there at some point in my career, or somewhere in Southeast Asia, just because it was so cool to see fans that were so connected to the football club and into the football and culture as well. So just an amazing experience. I'm so grateful that I had that chance to go there.
I don't want to sound like a fool by asking this, but is Texoma in Texas?
Texoma is in Texas. Yeah, it's in Sherman, Texas. Yeah, right. So 45 minutes outside of Dallas.
And Texas has got quite a few clubs, if I can say. So Texoma is a new one to me. And what are they like as a football club? USL League One, as a step up from where you were before.
Yeah, it was a step up, and I think the USL was a league I always targeted when I was in college, where it's, if it doesn't work out and I don't get drafted, I'd love to play in the USL Championship or USL 1. So I was really, really, so grateful for the opportunity. And then as soon as I got there, the staff, Adrian took such good care of me and Ashley. They really, really went out of their way to make all the players feel super comfortable, and it was a great experience. Living in Texas was amazing. I'd always wanted to live in Texas, to be honest, growing up in Seattle, just because I never visited or never really knew what it was like. And we had an underwhelming season as a first-year club, and Texoma is no longer in operations as a USL 1 club, so they're now in USL 2. But it's an experience I look back at. I'm, also just so grateful for that. They kind of took a chance on me a little bit, because I didn't have any USL experience, and coming from Australia, it's not a common place to be getting players from.
And now you find yourself at Miami FC, which is a club that is getting quite a bit of recognition, and I'll speak about that shortly. But obviously, you share the same name as Inter Miami. Is there a rivalry between the two clubs?
I don't think there's a rivalry. I think there's I think everybody on my team respects Inter Miami and what they're doing for football culture in the United States. I mean, having Messi. Being able to have Messi in American soccer culture is an honor, and I think what the notoriety and the power that Inter Miami has, I think, is really amazing. So I don't look at it as a rivalry. Excuse me. I would love to play against them. If we had the chance to play against them in the Open Cup, that'd be amazing. But or a friendly, I think that'd be a great opportunity to try to unite the two. But no, I don't think there's a rivalry at all, really, in that sense of hatred or anything like that.
How far are the two clubs apart?
It's a great question. Inter Miami's at the new stadium, which is close to the airport, which is about 10 minutes from where I am right now. And then the club from me is about 30 minutes because we play at FIU's Pitbull Stadium, which is about 40 minutes away. Or 30, so I'd say it's about 30 minutes, kind of on other sides of Miami.
Okay. And what's the attendance like for you guys at Miami FC?
I don't have the numbers, but I'd say it's probably between 500 to 700, I think. So nowhere near Inter Miami's. But the club's also planning on moving to Homestead next year, which is going to be closer to the Everglades, the city closest to the Everglades. So that might be a different community that they're looking to bring in, and that will kind of have a different sort of feeling than what it is right now in Miami. The fans that we do have in Miami, though, have been amazing. So the people that do show up and support us have been nothing short of incredible, and they're very, very passionate, and they're very, very loud. So yeah, we appreciate them a lot.
The reason why I mentioned that the team's getting recognition, it's actually getting recognition from myself. I don't know how many other people actually have quite looked into it, so I apologise. And the reason being is because I flicked on the TV the other day and I see Curaçao are playing against Scotland in friendlies, and In all fairness, Curacao put up a good fight. I forgot what the final score was, but players like Taz Chong and Lakota, and obviously you've got two teammates of yours that are going to the World Cup with Curacao. Your goalkeeper, Ruben, obviously, Lakota has a brilliant career in Europe. What's been the behind-the-scenes outlook to two players that are now going from your team to the World Cup? Have you been speaking to them much?
Yeah, Aloy and Jurgen are two amazing guys, two very humble. They've come in with these incredible careers that you don't see a lot of players that have played at that height, come play in USL Championship. But they are, and you'd think, maybe they're going to be a bit arrogant or maybe they're going to kind of like not talk to any of us, but they're incredibly friendly. They're two of the biggest leaders on the team. Aloy has been amazing for me as a center back to play with, and really try to pick his brain about what he has seen at the levels that he's played at. And then also being able to mark Jurgen in training every day has been, a pleasure as well. Just the little movements and the small details that you don't see a lot of players have. Obviously the heights that he's played at. So it's been incredible. And really they've just been two anchors on our team, really like socially and just, having the group rally around them. And, couldn't be happier for them that they're going to the World Cup, but we also miss them a lot. And we do miss their presence on the field a lot. Pipe's done a great job in goal, who stepped in for Aloy, but at the same time, it'll be great to have them back. But it's going to be an amazing experience to watch them on the television and see them playing against some of the best players in the world. But when I train with them and see their mentalities, it doesn't surprise me at all that they're playing in the World Cup.
So is the MLS having some sort of a pause during the World Cup, but then for the lower leagues like the Championship, League One, League Two, maybe they're carrying on? What's the insight on that?
Yeah, we're carrying on. We don't play this weekend, but we'll be playing next weekend, and then we're going to play, just all the way through the World Cup. So, yeah, we're going to miss the two of them. It'd be great to have a break so we could watch it and be able to enjoy it completely. But no, there's not going to be any break for the USL.
But I mean, there could be an increase in attendances across the country then, because obviously there'll be loads of fans flocking over. But I wanted to ask about Curacao. I wouldn't say they're my World Cup underdog, but they're definitely going to give it a good shot. Where do you see Curacao doing in their group? Because they've got quite an interesting group, and I actually wouldn't be surprised if they were to get out of that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something we talked about in the locker room with Aloy and Jurgen, and I really do believe, based on the talent that I see in the squad, and I'm no football analyst, but you see a lot of players where they kept people talk about Curacao and say, oh, what is a team? I know Tim Howard had made comments like, what is Curacao doing in the World Cup? But I look at a squad full of players that have played at the highest levels of Europe that are currently playing in Eredivisie. You look at people with careers like Jurgen, who's coming off of scoring a lot of goals, and same with Aloy with his experience as a veteran, where, I look at their group and I think they'll get out. I really hope they do. I think they'll surprise a lot of people with how good they are. I mean, when they played against Scotland, they were up 1-0 before Jurgen got the red card, which I don't think was a red card at all. So that could have been a different story, if that call hadn't happened, which I was shocked that they gave a red for that. But yeah, I mean, I think it'll be great to see how they do, and they're definitely going to be underdogs, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if I see them make it out of the group and go even further than that.
So are you going to be watching any World Cup games? Are you looking to go to any games physically, or I know with the season heating up, possibly not?
It will be completely dependent on our schedule that we have, and if we're going to have trainings or walkthroughs or anything on the same day or traveling. I have targeted the Saudi Arabia versus Uruguay game. It's probably my best shot of going to one. It's on a Monday, so we'll see. We'll see what happens with that, but I'll definitely be watching. I'll definitely be watching Curacao. Definitely be watching the United States. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how it goes. I can't wait. It's amazing that we have the honor of hosting it too. So it'll be amazing.
For sure. Now I wanted to lastly speak about your business. You're the founder of Odyssey College Recruiting, which is basically giving back to people who have done a very similar journey to yourself. So could you speak to me about that?
Yeah, Odyssey, I started about a year and a half ago. I'd worked in college sports since I started my pro career, actually. Flower City, I needed to pick up another job on the side. Even though we were full-time, I just needed to make sure I had enough to support myself. And I got into, working with players that were interested in playing collegiately. And so it's been such an amazing experience giving back, like you said, and, you see a lot of players that have very similar mentalities to myself, but there's also players I work with that, say, I just want to play at any level. I just want to go and just have a great experience. So it's been a gift in being able to work with them, like so many youth players, and then also be able to mentor them from the soccer side and, get to know what's going on with youth soccer in the United States these days. But yeah, basically what we do is we consult local domestic players on how to go about the college recruiting process, how to email coaches, how to get in touch with them, how to, turn interest into an actual offer to go on. And then we also work with international players that are looking to come over to the United States to participate in college soccer. And, it's been an amazing experience. I've met some amazing people through that too. So yeah, that's a whole nother podcast about everything going on with college soccer and youth soccer in America. But yeah, it's been a incredible part of the journey.
Well, we'll have to get you on for the part 2, but for part 1, thank you very much for joining me, and all the best for the rest of the season.
Thank you, Jamie. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for doing that. It was an honor to